This week on Engage the Sage.
Hi everybody, I'm Don Saucier. Welcome to this week's episode of Engage the Sage. In our last few videos, we talked about how to infuse empathy into your courses to make the teaching and learning experience better for you and for your students. In those videos, I talked about an overarching empathetic course design perspective that, if you advocate and believe, is going to make courses better for you and your students. I also talked about empathetic syllabi statements that you might want to make about mental health and about respect for diversity and about empathy and generally being a factor in your courses. And I also talked about an empathetic Zoom perspective that you might want to consider using in your classes to make things better for everybody. Definitely check out those videos if you haven't already, and we'll link them in the description for you below. Today, I'm going to be talking about how to infuse empathy into your course structure and policies. As you've probably heard me say before, our teaching philosophy and our practice should be really motivated and rooted in our support for our students' learning and student success. And I think by taking an empathetic approach to our course structure and policies, we can better support that learning and success. So I have 5 recommendations for how we can infuse empathy into our course structure and policies. I think these recommendations are going to make it more fair and reasonable for the students to learn and succeed in your classes. My first recommendation is to provide an empathetic semester structure for your course. At my institution this semester, for instance, we don't have a spring break. We have 15 weeks straight of course content. And what that means is we don't get a break. We don't kind of get to relax or recharge or refresh at any point during the semester, the way that that semester is typically set up. So what I'm advocating is that we build those in. Think about how you can insert catch-up days, rest days, prep days, well-being days, work days throughout your course to provide you and your students some much-needed time to catch up, recharge, and refresh. I will also recommend that when you're structuring your semester, beware of that end of the semester chaos and buildup. We've done another video about kind of managing the end of the semester chaos. Definitely check that one out. But at the end of the semester, a lot of us have a tendency to have our students do a lot of things worth a lot of points in our class. If you're going to have smaller assignments more frequently throughout the class and less of them really building up at the end, I think this is a much more empathetic approach to that semester schedule. My second recommendation is to provide an empathetic, predictable weekly routine for your course. I think one of the ways that we can support our students and reduce their stress and anxiety is we let them know weekly, this is what you can expect. Maybe you have an announcement email going on Monday. Maybe assignments are due on Wednesday. Maybe you're going to have asynchronous lecture content posted on Friday, or whatever that happens to be. But if you have a pretty consistent weekly schedule for your students, and maybe even a checklist or a to-do list in your learning management system, like we use Canvas, that would set it up so your students know, I come to this module, I do these things, and I'm all set. I think switching things up on them, having them change the ways that they do things, having them change the deadlines of things are due, is just going to insert a little bit of chaos into their lives in which they are already chaotic. So providing a consistent weekly routine, I think, is going to support your students' learning and their success in your course. I also recommend that weekly routine is reasonable. It's fair and reasonable given the level of your course and the amount of time that you expect them to spend on your course. I think right now, and this is one of the things about empathetic course design perspective in general, is we have to be attentive to the things that students are doing in their lives outside of our course and understanding that our course is one of, but not the only one of their priorities. So making sure that we are not overloading them is going to be very helpful to them. And it's going to be helpful for us because if we overload them, that work is then going to come back and overload us. My third recommendation is that no matter what course modality that you're teaching in, is provide opportunities for synchronous contact with your students. I recommend that you consider high flex options that allow your students to engage with your course however is going to work for them. Maybe you have a face-to-face option, socially distanced with masks. Maybe you have a face-to-face option. Maybe you have the option for them to Zoom in synchronously. Maybe you have the option for them to check out that material later asynchronously. But no matter how you set up the modality of your class, I absolutely recommend you build in some synchronous components to your class so that you can connect to them and they can connect to you. I think there's a number of benefits to providing some of that real-time synchronous contact with your students. First of all, it allows you to connect with and build rapport with your students, get you to learn who they are, let them know that you care about them and their learning. It allows you to check in on how they're doing. You can ask how they're doing, but you can even use like pandemic nicknames, like my colleague Tracy Brimhall told me about, where you can do things like ask, your first name is how you're feeling right now. Your last name is the last food you ate. And this is a really easy way to kind of check on their emotional situations that are going on that day. And you can follow up with them. If they're telling you they're overwhelmed and they're stressed, this is good information for you to have. Another benefit is allows you to check in on their learning in real time. One of the things that I miss in face-to-face classes that I'm not teaching right now is that I don't get to see their reactions to what it is I'm teaching. I don't get to kind of quiz them in the moment as easily. Well, I'm starting to do more of that in my synchronous online classes because I can start to do those real check-ins. So whether it's face-to-face or it's online, having these opportunities to these real-time check-ins on their learning is going to help you teach them better. And it's going to provide the opportunity for them to ask questions. If they are not there, if they're watching your video later, they don't have that opportunity in real time to say, hold up, that didn't make sense. Can I ask my question? And then you can get them back on track. So rather than having to send you an email the next day or something like that, you can immediately alleviate their confusion, answer their question, and support their learning. And overall, I think if you have a synchronous component of your class, this provided some much needed social connection. It allows you to connect to them to connect to you. You'll probably find this is going to bring you some of that fulfillment that really, really drives your teaching and makes us love this experience. So I think we get to enjoy it. It's probably going to be the best part of the class if we have synchronous connections. My fourth recommendation is to infuse empathy into your attendance policy. If you have synchronous components to your class, you're probably going to now run into the issue where students sometimes can't make those synchronous components. And first of all, as far as this goes, I recommend that you let them know what your expectations are for attendance for those synchronous components. So make sure that your expectations are clearly communicated to your students and also that they're fair and reasonable given the conditions in which your students are learning. If you're going to mandate attendance at these synchronous components, I really recommend that you think about a contingency option for when students can't make those mandatory sessions. You may consider making a video recording of that class meeting available for asynchronous viewing later. Maybe you include a small assignment that won't take them a lot of time to do and you a lot of time to grade, where they say things like maybe they reflect on the experience, maybe they tell you the most interesting thing they learned, the most surprising thing they learned, maybe they ask you a question. But give them some way to let you know that even though I wasn't there with you, I got to learn the information, I demonstrated my learning, even though I wasn't able to be at the synchronous component. One of the things you might be able to do is maybe offer a couple of freebie tokens or wildcard tokens or just free passes or something like that for students who can't make a couple of your classes. Maybe everyone gets 3 free passes. Everyone can miss 3 of these synchronous components with no penalty and without having to do a makeup assignment. This might be pretty painless for you and for your students. They don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything, but you also let them know most of the time, I expect you to be there. Other times there might be makeup assignments. Other times there might be consequences. But when life happens a couple of times, we just move on. And what I'm really recommending here is that your attendance policy should empathetically take into account the situations in which students are living. Think about the challenges they're facing and realize that sometimes they just can't make it. They might want to be in our class. Our class might be the best thing that they do. It might be their favorite thing. And sometimes they just can't be there. And I think having an attendance policy that doesn't penalize them too severely for not being able to be there is really appropriate. My fifth recommendation is to infuse empathy into your late policy in your class. I'll be the first to admit, I did not used to take late work. I had a very strict late policy. Wouldn't take late work, really had to have truly extenuating circumstances for me to even consider it. Didn't really give extensions. And I told people this because I was preparing them for the real world where not getting your stuff on time had real consequences. But now I think it's more empathetic for me to realize that maybe it's not that important to get that information in exactly by a deadline that I probably arbitrarily chose in the first place. So what I have now is I do have due days and times for assignments, but I also have an empathy statement in my syllabus, and you should watch the video about that. And it lets my students know that if you have extenuating circumstances, if you have stuff happening and you can't get that assignment in on time, and maybe you missed getting that assignment in, reach out to me and I'll work with you. Let me know what's up because I want you to be able to demonstrate your learning in my class. If I don't give my students the opportunity to demonstrate their learning in my class, then my class can't be successful for anyone. So I'm trying to be much more empathetic and letting them know that if you miss a deadline, if you can't make a deadline, let me know and we'll find a way for you to demonstrate that learning. Maybe you feel the need to put a small penalty on that in your classes, that's fine. but come up with something that's going to be empathetic for your students and their situations to allow them to successfully demonstrate the learning that you want them to demonstrate. Now, since I've been using this empathetic late policy for the last couple of semesters, I've noticed a couple of things. First of all, I've noticed that most of my students aren't late. Most of my students just get their stuff in by the due date and time, and that's great. But what I've also noticed for the students who do use the late policy, it does not appear to be an unfair advantage. It appears that these are students who are struggling with something. There are circumstances that are affecting their ability to get their work done on time. And I would much rather meet them where they are. I would much rather support them through those times than to create additional unnecessary challenges. So I encourage you to think about what your late policy is teaching them. I used to think my late policy was teaching them to be responsible and to get things in on time because I said so. Now, my new late policy, my new empathetic late policy, it teaches them that when you need help, you should reach out to people and they will help you. And in reflection, I think that's the better lesson to learn. So there you have 5 recommendations for how you can infuse empathy into your course structure and your policies. And I think that when you include these recommendations in your course structure and your policies, you're going to have better experiences in teaching and learning. You're going to enjoy your classes more. Your students are going to enjoy your classes more, but they're also going to demonstrate their learning better. I think when we infuse empathy into all the elements of our course, what we have done is better operationalized our mission as teachers. We have better supported our students' learning and their success. And that's what we're in it for. And I don't know about you, but when my students learn and they succeed in my classes, I take a great deal of fulfillment from that. So in reality, infusing empathy in your class will be better for them, but it's also going to be a lot better for you. In the comments below, I want to hear other ways that you've demonstrated the infusion of empathy in your class structure and policies. In our next video, we're going to talk about how to infuse empathy into your course assignments and assessments. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching this episode of Engage the Sage. Please like, subscribe, sign up for notifications, share us on social media, and we'll see you next time on Engage the Sage.